Day 491 of Russia's 3-day special military operation. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a quick look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia is sitting on more than 227,000 military personnel losses there. Then as for hardware losses, 2 tanks, 10 APVs, and 27 artillery. And as you can see, the tank losses versus the artillery losses remain in complete disparity. Because, reason being, more than armoured vehicles or fighter jets, artillery instead has always been key to Russia's wartime doctrine. But as you can probably guess at this point, the Russian army clearly takes a quantity over quality approach to their battlefield tactics. Then we'll head across to the map and we'll start out in the Donbass today. So just north of Bakhmut, the AFU liberated some more land. Now we'll just scooch into there and over, there we go. So north, west, and I'll pull up the date map to give you a bit of an idea. There we go. As they took back control of some of the highway that leads up to Slavyansk. And then moving down just a bit, as for Bakhmut itself, there is indeed a Ukrainian presence on the central west outskirts of the city. Although strategically speaking, the AFU are more so focused on assault operations north and south of Bakhmut as a means to take it back. And so, speaking of Bakhmut South, Ukrainian forces successfully stormed Russian positions just north of Klishchivka, though we can't see it updated on the map yet, and it all played out, in fact, pretty impressively. As Ukrainian drone intel showed that Russian positions were comparatively much less defended in the north of Klishchivka in the forest area, which was a much more optimal choice in direction for the AFU as opposed to performing assaults directly into much more fortified and contested Russian positions in the town itself. And it cannot be understated how key this tactic is to a modern battlefield approach. That being Ukrainian surveillance drones obtaining a real-time assessment of enemy unit placements, but also communicating that information back in real time to the AFU assault groups on the ground. Then just south in Kurdy the AFU pushed even further forward here in the last day, taking up into Russian positions and specifically taking over Russian trenches beyond the canal line, as the remaining Russian soldiers fled more easterly. And for a moment there was pretty serious close quarters combat going on. And all aided once again by the Ukrainian drone operators relaying that real-time information to those trench-storming AFU soldiers, literally advising them of the Russian soldiers that were in the process of reloading their weapons just around the corners in those very same trenches. And the rest was history, which just goes to show the sheer effectiveness of having that on-the-ground real-time intelligence, just like that at your disposal. And I'm actually reminded of a Russian army commander on Russian late-night TV last year that said, referring to the armed forces of Ukraine, that their main resource was intelligence. Which, when you take it out of context as a single screen grab, as you can see here, it's actually quite humorous. So all in all, quite an impressive day for advancements on the Eastern Front for Ukraine. And so then we'll head along the map and we'll head down to the Southern Front of the moment, where 6 explosions were reported in the Russian-occupied city of Tokmak, in the Zaporizhia Oblast, which is located 30 kilometers or about 20 miles south of the front lines there, as Ukrainian forces continue to target Russian military installations of various types. And since one HIMARS pod holds 6 GIMLARS missiles, it is possible that it was as a result of a HIMARS strike. being carried out right there by Ukraine in that Tokmak location overnight. Then I'll just lightly touch on the front contact points today. So there was a little bit of liberation or territory gained by the AFU just south of Orikhiv. And it does warrant a mention to say that the main event of the Ukrainian counteroffensive is still to come, as those main Ukrainian counteroffensive reserves for the effort are still not yet engaged. And as part of those upcoming efforts, we may likely see the UK-provided Challenger 2 tanks, which I'm especially looking forward to, just because of their overwhelming capability to take such a beating and still operate. Of course, the same thing can be said for the US Abrams tanks, however, they're trailing behind in the training and deployment process by a factor of at least 2 or 3 months. But just for the south here, we're still dealing with a lot of operational silence as the existing engaged Ukrainian brigades continue their operations right now. Then we'll head on over to the adjacent oblast of Curson, as it is quite an interesting location right now. As following the detonation of the Kakhovka Dam by the Russian army almost a month ago now, which was a reactionary move on Russia's part right after Ukraine commenced its counteroffensive operations, which meant that Russia saved itself from having to deal with a larger or more extended front line for a time. But now, in fact, we're starting to see the area upstream from the Kakhovka Dam is drying up very fast. Thus, soon, the Russian forces will have another 200 kilometers or so of front lines to defend with stretched resources and less troops. As we'll start to see, with more regularity, multiple Ukrainian special forces units crossing the empty Kakhovka reservoir at a multitude of different points, in fact. Now, of course, there are already limited operations like these in action as we speak, as elements of the AFU are establishing bridgeheads on the southern occupied sectors of Curson. In fact, various sources, and Russian sources at that, report right now that Ukraine continues to hold positions just south of the Antonivka bridge on the Russian-occupied side of the Dnieper River. So, did the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam buy Russia some time? Absolutely, but not forever. And they'll be right back to where they started soon again, having to contend with the reactivation of hundreds of kilometers of fresh new Ukrainian incursion zones. Then we'll head across to some news for today. So the Lithuanian president has announced the purchase of 2 NASAMS anti-aircraft missile systems, which it plans to hand over to Ukraine and is expected to do so in about 3 months, which is actually a wildly short time frame when we're talking about these amazingly capable air defense systems. And although it's actually quite challenging to directly compare NASAMS against other types of air defense systems, such as the US Patriot or the German IRSTs, due to the types of roles or threats they are designed for, I will say NASAMS are known for their flexibility, being able to utilize different types of missiles such as the AIM Sidewinders and the AIM AMRAAMs, which are in incredible availability and supply from the vast number of next-door NATO operators. Then in some other news, it's Purge Time, baby! So, as Army General and Dr. Evil wannabe, Sergei Sorovikin was arrested for treason and sent to a pre-trial detention center, as per Russian state media reports, as he was aware of Prigozhin's military coup before they commenced that on the weekend. But more importantly, all without informing Russian Commander-in-Chief Vladimir Putin. Which makes a bit of sense to me, given that Sorovikin has been known to be on a good working relationship with Prigozhin in the past. And this is especially interesting, as Sorovikin and Prigozhin together would be considered the most military capable commanders at Russia's disposal, both of which have now been sidelined. which means Ukraine seems to get pretty lucky in this transaction, especially as, after the purge, all that's left are likely to be incompetent yes men. Just like my favorite two Russian army generals, Gerasimov and Shoigu. And so all of this happens to have transpired after what seems to be Russia getting the tip-off from US intelligence on the matter. Or counterintelligence, if you will. But it doesn't really matter for Surovikin at this point because off to the gulag this guy goes. Then in some more news, as for a bit of a Prigozhin update, he still appears to be granted amnesty from Putin and taking a holiday in Belarus. Now, I really feel like from what I've seen, there actually doesn't appear to be a few things that are getting reported too much about Russia's almost civil war last weekend. Because it seems like the wider general consensus at the moment is that Prigozhin folded and stopped his potentially successful insurrection. But given the outcome of the weekend's events, it appears both sides, so I'm talking Putin and Prigozhin, had leverage over one another. And the suggested leverage that Putin had on Prigozhin was that Putin actually nabbed or threatened many of Prigozhin's Wagner PMC's commanders' families, making it operationally difficult to go full tilt into a civil war. Having said that, it's been quite well reported at this point that a large majority of the Wagner forces were quite displeased with the outcome, having to turn around and just go on right back home. But it still certainly appears both sides had a bit of leverage, and I've spoken about this stuff before. And in the end, it appears both sides simply chose survival in the end. But I'd like to add, in the words of Dr. Seuss, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Because events like these inherently shatter a society's own psychological image, leading them to question or criticize their leaders in greater volumes. Then in some other news, Ukraine's parliament has announced the return of the monthly bonus system for soldiers when they go for service in designated combat zones, which amounts to an extra 2,700 extra or so in US dollars per month. And of course, many nations around the world for their military personnel already do this sort of thing. But the implications of this are twofold. So firstly, this will do wonders for morale for the Ukrainian forces. And secondly, it's a big indicator of a potential upcoming major offensive, with all of those currently unutilized Ukrainian brigades in reserve that are ready and roaring to go. Then for some funnies to round it all off for today, guys, I'm pretty pleased with these two. It's my kind of humor. I hope you like it too. But so first up for the first, funny here. So Russian state media TV, political talk shows appear to be blaming the US for last weekend's Russian military coup attempts. Because US intelligence agencies were aware of the upcoming coup, but said nothing about it to Russia. Which is really quite an odd sentiment to state. I mean, does Russia want the US to interfere with Russia's internal affairs or not? But the hilarious irony in all of this is that it's funny because Prigozhin for months seemingly hinted at it. The internet was quite somewhat expecting it. Even I posted this old Simpsons meme months ago on the channel about the possibility. In fact, I made multiple versions of that meme. Also, Surovikin seemed to know about it, as we saw today. Some media outlets even suggested that some within the ranks of the Russian FSB intelligence agency knew about it as well. So it appears just about everybody knew about it, except for Bunker Boy Putin, who is actually pretty well known for being in this sort of a information vacuum, where he only wants to hear good news. And thus is only surrounded by his few most loyal yes-men generals that have clearly been coercively manipulated through fear only to give Putin good news. Corrupt autocracy at its finest right there. And this won't change, unless of course there's a deep systemic change where Putin is ousted. And for the final funny for the day, and my personal favourite for the day, or possibly week, it's a bit of a two-parter as well. So in a world where Putin is generally quite an isolated man, as we're seeing lots more and more, even just today, sitting what feels like miles away when speaking to his political ministers or whatnot, as the paranoid germaphobe that he is, all of a sudden he's out on the town clearly looking to drum up popular support after his self-inflicted embarrassing weekend. It's almost like it's an election year, which is a laughable concept in Russia anyway. And in this video where you'll see the majority of the crowd are a female crowd and maybe one or two, let's say, undercover security agents in the crowd that seem to be more so looking at the crowd than Putin. Gee, I wonder why. But the second part to this, and what I find both undeniable and funny, is this video. So see if you can guess what I'm about to say right now. Yep, he looks like a shiny doll. More specifically, he has literally just come from his Botox injection appointment. And it's unquestionable at this point. Just look at those grotesquely overly shiny and luscious cheeks and forehead and everything else. Now, I'm no expert on Botox, but I do know that the more you have it, the more you need it. And you end up just really chasing your tail, trying to retain younger looking skin and also shake off the shrivelly side effects of it in the process too. And I just guarantee that his Botox injector specialist is the biggest yes man of them all, telling Putin how natural and how perfect and how unnoticeable it all looks. And I'm just more sure than ever at this point that this hideous monstrosity of an unnatural looking face will only get worse from this point. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe. Thanks again for all the support. Couldn't do all this without you. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.